The supposed mightiest demigod of Elden Ring is one of the most imposing characters and boss fights in the game, but surprisingly a lot of his background and lore are actually pretty easily accessible and explained. So in this video I want to look at the lore and background of the mighty red-maned warrior, but also present an explanation of his actions that I think has yet to receive much attention. Today we enter the Great Festival, to fight, overcome, and understand the demigod general, Starscourge Radahn. Because Radahn has some lore that is more well known, such as his doting over his horse Leonard, I won't necessarily be exploring every single in-game reference as meticulously in this video, though I will still be doing my best to present the lion's share of his lore and background. I'll supplement the more relaxed lore dive by spending more time speculating on his motivations and where we find him in the events of the game. This will be informed by the lore, but it's one of the areas where no conclusive answer is given, so it leaves room for speaking on what seems likely, as opposed to what is certain. Starting at the beginning, Radahn is the son of Radagon and Rennala, brother to Ranni and Rykard. He attained the status of demigod stepchild when Radagon left Rennala and became the second Elden Lord through his union with Queen Marika. We learn that Radahn took pride in his father from his Redmane helm's description, which reads, Radahn inherited the furious, flaming red hair of his father Radagon, and is fond of its heroic implications. I was born a champion's cub, now I am the lord of the battlefield's lion. The last line references Radahn's other source of inspiration, the warrior king Godfrey, first Elden Lord. Being the first Elden Lord and the one who fought in the wars of the Erdtree, Godfrey was a warrior through and through, so much so that his eyes dulled when he had vanquished his last worthy enemy. The warrior lord even had to take the beast regent Sarosh on his back to quell his lust for battle. Radagon and his championship may have found fondness in Radahn, but it is the first Elden Lord who truly enthralled him. As we learn from the rest of Radahn's armor, which sports a golden lion, the golden lion is said to symbolize Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, and his beast regent Sarosh. From his youngest years, Radahn was naturally captivated by the Lord of the battlefield. We see the drives of battle and war that make up much of the character of Godfrey to be very present in Radahn as well. He is known as the mightiest of the demigods from such sources as Jaren and the Starscourge heirloom. One of his most prolific titles, found in a variety of places, is that of General, and he led a host of mighty and extremely dedicated soldiers in the Redmanes. They were all reputed to be masterful warriors, and it was popularly said that the Redmanes knew no weakness. These themes of war and pride in combat are central to understanding Radahn, and we will see them again later. But first, I must note that they are not all that make him up. He is, after all, also son to Rennala, the Carrion Queen, so it's unsurprising that he also developed an affinity for sorceries, namely those related to space. We learn from his remembrance what is at this point one of the most famous tidbits of Elden Ring lore. The Red Lion General wielded gravitational powers which he learned in Sellia during his younger days. Also, he would never have to abandon his beloved but scrawny steed. These powers of gravitation are on full display in Radahn's boss fight, both to attack the player but also to move around his scrawny steed, who we know from Zuli the Witch to be named Leonard. Radahn is obviously quite large, so without the gravitational magic, he would have to have left the horse he probably grew up with. More on Radahn's large size can be found in my Radagon video. So here we get a bit of personal character development for Radahn, in his love for his horse, helping to flesh him out a bit as a real person. These powers also gave an opportunity for Radahn to learn under one more master, an Alabaster Lord. We learn from sorceries like Rocksling and Gravity Well that describe themselves as a gravitational technique studied by the young Radahn. His master was an Alabaster Lord with skin of stone. This connection to an Alabaster Lord lines up with what we will see as one of Radahn's greatest feats. But to understand the connection, we must first learn what the Alabaster Lords are. From their sword, we read that they are a race of ancients with skin of stone who are said to have risen to life when a meteor struck long ago. The Alabaster are a race that either came from or are associated with the stars, and the stars are where we turn to see the next chapter of Radahn's story. The gravitational powers might have started as a way to stay with his horse, but they soon became something much greater for Radahn, a way to prove his might and earn renown throughout the lands between. It is because of these that he gained the moniker Starscourge, and the heirloom of the same name tells the story. The mightiest hero of the demigods confronted the falling stars alone, and thus did he crush them, his conquest sealing the very fate of the stars. We also see the tale relayed in a swords monument in Caelid, which states, "The Starscourge conflict. Radahn alone holds Sellia secure, and stands tall to shatter the stars." This phrases Radahn as being somewhat of a defender of Sellia. Perhaps the stars spelled doom to the town where Radahn studied. Maybe they carried with them a threat such as more beings like the Alabaster Lords, or Estelle and the Falling Star Beasts. Would these supposed beings bring some form of danger? It's hard to say. Or maybe there was some other reason entirely to halt the stars. We will look at some of these more potential options later. In any case, this is a pivotal moment in Radahn's story, and in situating the world of the lands between as we find them in-game. There is more to the lore of Radahn, his connection with minor NPCs, his actions during and after the Shattering, and his fight with Malenia. But the rest of these seem much more contingent to me, and not as essential to Radahn's story. To briefly cover them, they first show how Radahn may have laid siege to the capital. And yes, I think it's reasonable to read the cinematics opening slide as Morgott and Radahn, as every other slide features prominent demigods or other prominent characters associated with them. So why would this slide just have Morgott be attacking a complete random or a soldier that looks so much like Radahn? Later we see Radahn and Malenia, the often talked about fight, where Radahn waits for Malenia to equip her prosthetic before picking up his own weapons, obviously displaying his desire for a fair, honorable fight. His theme of gallantry in battle is once again apparent, wanting proper combat itself more than any end that combat could serve as a means to. This is the fight which left Caelid festering in rot and Radahn mindless and infected, all sense having left him, which is the state we find him in-game. With that covered, I don't think any of this is as important as the conquest of the stars, which is saying something because we don't know that much about what this key moment even means. There is very little explanation of the conflict, and we as players are left to guess why Radahn did this and what doing this meant. We do know that this is an important event because 1, it is what gave Radahn his most impactful title, Starscourge. 2, it is something he continued to do even through the loss of his mind, the stars remained held until his death. And 3, because it held effect for the fates of other characters in the lands between. We can learn about this connection from the witch Selin, who explains that
the stars alter the fate of the Carian royal family, and the fate of your mistress Rani. But long ago, General Radahn challenged the swirling constellations, and in a crushing victory arrested their cycles. Now he is the force that repulses the stars. If General Radahn were to die, the stars would resume their movement, and so too would Rani's destiny.
When we defeat Radahn, the stars are set free to move again, and with them the fate of those tied to them. The blacksmith Iji has some explanatory dialogue.
You've defeated General Radahn, unlocking the stars. The general was blighted by scarlet rot and driven to madness. But not long ago, he was hailed as the mightiest demigod of them all. There is no parallel to your achievement, nor to Lady Rani's acute judgment of character. Thanks to you, Lady Rani's fate once again stirs, and the path to Nokron has opened. Descend underground, where the fallen star struck Limgrave, and make it yours. The precious treasure of Nokron.
So Radahn was holding not only the stars, but the fate of his sister Rani in stasis. Here is where I wish to offer my own theory. We don't know for certain why Radahn holds the stars back, so we are left to speculate with the little information we have. It seems reasonable to me to think that Radahn could be interpreted as acting on Rani's side here. To make the case, We know Ranni employed the help of her other brother Rykard in her plotting. We read from the Blasphemous Claw, the item that lets us parry Malekith and deflect the power of the Black Blade, that, on the night of the dire plot, Ranni rewarded Praetor Rykard with these traces. Should the coming trespass one day transpire, they would serve as a last resort foil, allowing Rykard to challenge Malekith the Black Blade, the Black Beast of destined death. So maybe Ranni also employed the help of her other brother, Radahn. As Ranni was an Empyrean, she was slotted to be a potential successor to Queen Marika. We know the other two Empyreans, Malenia and Miquella, were both cursed from birth, so maybe the Greater Will saw Ranni as the favored Empyrean. If Radahn's actions of holding back the stars halted the progression of Ranni's fate, maybe that also meant that she couldn't progress to godhood and succeed Marika as long as the stars were in stasis. This stalling could let Ranni prepare her plan in peace. We learn from Radahn's Starscourge Greatsword that he earned considerable renown as the Starscourge in his youth. So this would mean that either Ranni had this plan in place from when Radahn was young, or it was an unintentional byproduct. That Radahn didn't explicitly intend to help Ranni in her plan, but it ended up that way. We could also look at the holding back the stars from the point of view of Radahn himself. Obviously it earned him renown, but it also should have stalled his own fate. Radahn was a Carrion too, so his fate was subject to the stars. Maybe holding them back would mean he could gain renown and fight in battle without having to worry about death or an undesirable progression of his own fate before he felt he was ready or had proven his battle worthiness. Both of these theories could tie into the Radahn we see in-game. Because he has lost his mind, he is unable to choose to release the stars. For Ranni, this means that he has to die for her plan to progress. If he hadn't been infected with rot, perhaps Ranni would have been able to tell or ask Radahn to release the stars, to allow her to move forward with her plan. No sibling murder needed. The rot also prevents Radahn from moving forward with his own fate and plans. His armies are scattered and plagued. Radahn has no wit to reassemble them or to continue to wage battle. But it seems he cannot die either. By stalling the stars and losing his ability to choose to free them, Radahn has put himself in a feedback loop that seems impossible to break. The stars prevent his fate from progressing, and the rot prevents him from releasing the stars. So he is forever cursed to sit in the sands, gorging on the bodies of friend and foe alike. Perhaps the stalling of the stars even takes away his ability to progress to death, until, of course, someone even mightier comes along, like the Tarnished. Would the rot have killed Radahn if not for the stars being held up? Would his great rune burning with fire have resisted the rot and kept him alive in any case? Or is all of this metaphorical holding of fate not really applicable? Was the halted fate of Ranni really just because the physical star that Radahn held back would open up the path to Nokron, and if he let it go, it would allow Ranni's plan to progress because Nokron would simply now be physically accessible? Unfortunately, we can't say for certain. I think some blend of these themes presented makes sense, as does the idea that Radahn could have been helping Ranni, since such help did not seem to get in the way of his own yearning for battle or glory. But either way, we are left in this sea of speculation. Ranni doesn't seem malicious to her siblings, and Radahn seemed to have war-minded but fair intentions. The Shattering, after all, did offer new opportunities for war, as all the great wars had already been ended. Well, except for the war with the stars, apparently. Radahn would have had a good deal of motivation to go along with his sister's plans, since it offered him a pristine opportunity for war that he wouldn't have gotten otherwise. But this is speculation. What we can say for certain is that despite the mindless curse of rot, Radahn did hold onto one ideal, something which was with him since childhood that guided his life of battle, learning, and combat. Something that I will say I think supports my theory. After we defeat Radahn in glorious spectacle, fighting amongst a host of champions, as the game clearly begs us to do, we can hear a concluding remark from Jaren, the guest commander who served the Starscourge in combat and war. He sums it all up, saying,
"At last, the war festival has ended. Brave champion, you have our gratitude. The celebration was spectacular. General Radahn is surely pleased. Festering with rot and crippled by madness, all he wanted was an honorable death.
I hope you have all enjoyed the video. Radahn is a hot topic in Elden Ring discussions, making it to the top of many lists of favorite boss fights and characters. There is more to discuss surrounding him, but I wanted to cover some of what I thought were the really core aspects of his story that didn't get as much focus in the discussions I've seen. If you did enjoy, then subscribe and stick around, as I will be continuing to make more Elden Ring videos, lore and otherwise. Though I will be on hiatus next month, so videos might be a bit more sporadic. I plan to make a few in advance so there isn't a total content drought, but the standard lore vids will have some more space in between them for just a bit. Well, thanks for watching, follow me on Twitter if you haven't, and peace.